This video contains massive spoilers for the book 1984 by George Orwell. Please do not continue watching if you want to read this book. I nevertheless highly recommend reading it if you have not yet done so. Furthermore, I fade in, throughout the video, letters with numbers which lead to quotes in external documents linked in the video description. I use this method to not stretch the video in an unbearable length. If one is interested in reading up all quotes, one can do so. And without further ado, we may start now with clearing our heads and embrace a past that could also be the future. Imagine a world in which there is no freedom of speech, no freedom of possession, not even freedom of emotion. Helicopters flying through the air searching for thought criminals. From every side someone is watching. Someone that impersonates Ingsoc, English socialism. This person is similar to Stalin in many aspects and is called Big Brother, with his very own slogan, Big Brother is watching you. There are telescreens everywhere, so are microphones and thought police. A perfect dystopian world with so many moral issues that they fill up the entire book and leave no space for other topics or themes. And now imagine that people live there at that time in London, in Airstrip 1 in Oceania. In the book 1984, there is one protagonist, Winston Smith, a member of the Outer Party. The third-person narrator is limited on Winston's view and only Winston's view. It is written in past tense, which seems plausible for our time, but one has to remember that the book was written in 1948, shortly after World War II. George Orwell then feared the communists the most, and therefore all three superpowers described in the book are communist-based. Oceania with their Ingsoc, East Asia with their death warship, and Eurasia with their neo-Bolshevism. The narrator is very reliable in knowing what Winston is like, what he feels and what he thinks. He accurately describes everything happening to the protagonist and can predict the future in an obvious manner. That means one knows, for example, who will be vaporized. Nevertheless, in the book there is not only censorship described but also implemented. Back to Winston. The reader gets to know him firstly by his outer attributes and his slow pace. The more one learns about him, the more one learns about the party. His workplace is precisely described and his clothing as well, so is his poorness, in the sense of him not being able to buy a pyjama. One gets to know his room in Victory Mansion and that party members are constantly monitored. The plot is quite tight and very depressing with many flashbacks and foreshadowing moments. We, the readers, start off by being introduced to Winston and Ingsoc, therefore Big Brother and the party as well in part 1. Every chapter is numbered in Latin and restarts after each part. In part 1 there are also Winston's first encounters with Julia and O'Brien. But before that he starts writing diary, a forbidden procedure which is punished with death. That has no importance to Winston because even owning a book is punished with death and he bought one long ago. The diary entries are in cursive and a little bit smaller than the rest, except for the diary's entry in caps, which are like the normal writing. After beginning to write his first diary entry, he remembers his day at work in the Ministry of Truth, better known as Mini-True. At work he sees Julia for the first time and highly dislikes her, and all other women as well. He also describes his glimpse at and with O'Brien, thinking he is on his side. After that he is panicking because of Mrs. Parsons, a neighbor of his, knocking on his door, not knowing that it is Mrs. Parsons, but thinking it is the thought police, knowing about him writing a diary. He has to repair the sink at Mrs. Parsons and is frightened by her children playing thought police. Later at that day, Winston has a sort of flashback remembering a phrase someone once told him. "We shall meet in a place where there is no darkness." He assumes O'Brien told him the quote once. Notwithstanding the above, he has a highly erotic dream of Julia, which does not turn him on. The next morning he goes to work and the viewer gets to know his surroundings and colleagues a little better. Winston is highly past dependable. One can say the past is like a drug to him throughout the book. Winston decides therefore to seek answers from the proles, short for proletarians, the working class, writing it down in his diary. But before he starts searching for answers, he writes into his diary that he once saw the enemies of the party sitting in the Chestnut Tree Cafe, and that the diary is written for O'Brien, another foreshadowing passage. Winston goes to the proles and quickly gives up talking to them after being frustrated by an old man not giving him satisfying answers. He finds a shop with another old man, Mr. Charrington, selling him relics, teaching him a church song about the past and offering him a chamber above the shop. After that, he then encounters Julia a third time, still not knowing her name and her real purpose of following him, still thinking she is a member of the Thought Police. Part 2 starts with Winston seeing Julia trip and fall in front of him in the corridor. She tried to disguise giving him a secret message with her moves. The message tells Winston that Julia loves him. He instantly falls in love with her. After several attempts, he and Julia finally achieve to make out a meeting in a hideout. They then give a fuck on the rules, to put it literary. Following their love affair, Hate Week preparation starts and O'Brien invites Winston to his house. Winston uses the opportunity to join the Brotherhood, an organization which tries to overcome Ingsoc, with Emmanuel Goldstein, public enemy number 1, as their leader. He trusts O'Brien being on his side and is right that O'Brien makes it possible that he and Julia can join the Brotherhood. Another foreshadowing moment happens when O'Brien is not surprised by the quote of the Place of No Darkness. Winston then receives the book, which is only known by that very title, The Book. It was written by Emmanuel Goldstein and a must-read for the members of the Brotherhood, which one does not get to know because no member knows another. At Hate Week, Oceania suddenly switches enemies. Former ally East Asia becomes their enemy, and Eurasia as their former enemy becomes their ally. But that does not bother anyone, and the crowd keeps on hating the enemy, now East Asia. Winston is reading the book in the hideout, sitting right beside Julia when they both say that they are the dead. This then is echoed by the telescreen, right behind the picture, introducing the Thought Police crashing the reading session and arresting them both. Mr. Charrington is leading all of it, and he changed his appearance. Part 3 starts with Winston meeting several others in prison, which he had known for quite a while. Winston is being interrogated and broken by O'Brien until he completely surrenders when they torture him with his biggest fear, his fear of rats. After that they free him just to shoot him after several days. It all ends with him loving Big Brother, a down note on a down note. Though the real ending of the book is the appendix, in which Newspeak, the language of the party, is explained. The mood and the atmosphere both are highly influenced by the dystopian elements, which are the main topics as well. There are moral issues of enjoying people being hung, people being denounced and tortured, people being monitored. Monitoring is a good keyword because it is another dystopian aspect. It goes along with the totalitarianism, including everything from Ingsoc to Big Brother and the Thought Police. And with it, there goes endless warfare, which is held up to remain obedience. So censorship, as well as endless warfare, part of the party's plan to preserve their control. Along with the censorship goes erasing the past. The whole of Minitrue is used to rewrite every newspaper, every speech, everyone's history. But aside the classic dystopian aspects, there are likewise class separation and the individual against society. The concept of Ingsoc is based on the individual not being worth anything, but they still control every aspect of human life. Proles are not human beings in the eyes of the party. The party tries and always achieves to control the sex instinct, the begetting of children, and emotions in general. All of the above lead to the reader being shattered and overwhelmed by the book's darkness. In that darkness throughout this book, there are two moving passages. The first passage is focused on the struggle of Winston, after receiving the message from Julia that she loves him, to find the right time and place to talk to her. Throughout the passage, there are several occasions in which it fails and he must retreat. But after numerous attempts, he finally accomplishes his goal and talks to her. In that very moment, one is introduced to a character which could have also been the protagonist. Julia embodies a strong female character, taking immediately the lead on the conversation, which is unusual for a female character in that time of the book being written. But that is compensated by her attributes mainly based around the topic of sex, which she has acknowledged herself. This makes her character less suitable for a protagonist. I would have loved to see her being a little bit less the stereotype of a woman back in the times, but more of her being intelligent. So that in the end her attitude sticks in one's memory and not her physical attributes, and her being to blame for Winston losing his spirit. The second moving passage is another one of Winston's struggles, but this time it centers on the topic of self-acceptance. O'Brien, mid-interrogation of Winston's, tells him that Winston must look in the mirror and tell O'Brien and himself that he does not look old and ugly. Winston, at that time, is looking like a shipwreck, after being starved and tortured for an unknown period of time. This passage hits one hard, not only for Winston acknowledging his outer state, but also for him seeing O'Brien as a savior of his. O'Brien has throughout the book a deep connection to Winston. For a long time the reader thinks that they are brothers in mind. That is then flipped by 180 degrees. Still it does not throw off Winston. Exaggerated, he sees O'Brien as the devil and savior in one, making O'Brien an antagonist and ally at the same time. O'Brien also stands for the values of the party, embodying them fully. I must say that O'Brien is a well-engineered antagonist, having an evil master plan on the one hand side and having values he fights for on the other, which though go hand in hand. One does not know where the character of O'Brien starts and where the values of the party begin. They perfectly blend into each other. This makes it even more shattering to read by showing how easy it is for human beings to be convinced of an idea and to fight for it until the last man is standing. In the book 1984, there are a multitudinous different characters of which not everybody is named and few are having a personality. The main three are Winston, Julia and O'Brien, forming the shape of a circumflex. They only once all three meet at the same time, and at that time O'Brien is not yet the embodiment of the antagonist. Julia and Winston have a love relationship, which is established in the second part of the book. In the first, Winston hates her, and in the third, she hates him. One does not know what O'Brien feels towards Winston, or Julia. Neither does one know what Julia feels towards O'Brien. In fact, one does only know from Syme, a colleague of Winston, what he is thinking about Tom Parsons, also a colleague of Winston and Winston's neighbor, and that is because Syme said something about Mr. Parsons to Winston. One also knows what Mr. and Mrs. Parsons think about their children, which do not have names. Neither does Winston's mother, Mrs. Smith, have a name, nor Winston's sister, nor Mr. Smith. Aside Winston, one gets to know one other number to a person, 2731 Broomstead J. Everyone is given a number, followed by the surname and then the initial of the first name. Winston's is 6079 Smith W. The party created two characters, the big Stalinesque figure, Big Brother, and the public enemy number one, Emmanuel Goldstein. One comes to know some party members, which are all colleagues of Winston. There are Ampleforth, Mr. Parsons, Tillotson, Syme and Wiltshire. Syme is being vaporized, Ampleforth and Mr. Parsons land in the Ministry of Love, the Mini-Love. Tillotson and Wiltshire are very uninteresting for the reader. Another minor figure is Martin. He is the servant of O'Brien. Of bigger relevancy there are Mr. Charrington and Catherine. Mr. Charrington, as already mentioned, offers Winston and Julia a chamber just to then betray them because of him being part of the Thought Police. Catherine is Winston's wife, former wife to be exact. Winston did not like Catherine at all for her being stiff. Eventually, there are three ancient members of the party, Jones, Aronson and Rutherford, all of which are mentioned in one breath, and only exist in the mind of O'Brien and Winston, or just in Winston's to be exact. One could endlessly talk about all the character traits and mention everything in detail of every character in the book, but to not go beyond the constraints of this video, I will have put all the relevant aspects of the mentioned characters in the documents which are linked in the video description. As well as the numerous characters, there are a ton of adjectives throughout the book. There are many dark-toned ones to describe the atmosphere and not so many brighter ones to at least create some sort of an opposition to make the dark-toned ones even more shattering. A trend that occurs in the book is that many adjectives appear in pairs. It doubles the intended effect. The general mood is separated into three phases. The first being the phase of talking to other people, knowing one cannot talk freely. The second one is the phase of breaking the rules and creating a sort of hopeful atmosphere, which is then broken in phase 3, of not having any freedom anymore, being yelled at for doing normal things, creating of course a mood of helplessness, and everything is accompanied by Big Brother watching you. The absolute mood killer is Winston hearing of O'Brien watching him since 7 years. We now can loosen a little after that intense ride of an emotional, exhausting dystopian horror trip through a scenario placed in the past which could have also played in the future. All those elements that one finds throughout the book are plausible and possible for our modern society. The totalitarianism we nowadays see in states like Russia, China, North Korea and many more is frightening, and with a little more time it could evolve into a scheme of the book 1984. As we see in present time with Rongcheng as a flagship city for monitoring in communist China. The people there are not observed to be then tortured, but to take them away benefits like taking a loan. Being beneath a certain point account balance, as given in Rongcheng 600, will ban you from taking a loan. On the other hand side, one will profit from a high point account balance, unlike in the book 1984. Being in Rongcheng above 1300 points will allow one to enjoy certain extra features, like receiving a promotion more easily. There are also some sorts of censorship out there in the real world, but in my opinion there's nothing to be worried about. A real censorship did not happen in Germany after World War II, and if everything stays democratic, there will be none in near future. Unlike the endless warfare, there Germany is still invested in, even though they want peace on earth and an end to war, to quote Freddie Mercury. And I heavily doubt there will be peace on earth soon. Besides endless warfare, class separation plays still a huge role in our modern society. In Germany there is hard sphere, contrasting with the billionaires of the very same country. Class separation will certainly not stop, and there is no chance of it happening. There is not any possibility in all men being equal, to quote the contrary of the Declaration of Independence. Or as Friedrich Merz, a German politician and part-time feminist, said, "Also those who are socially weak find especially among us a heart and devotion." In this context, let me say a word to the women. That is also a prime example for an individual against a society. But I think that there is no such thing as a society oppressing citizens of this country. Therefore, an individual rising up against the collective force of all other inhabitants combined is unrealistic as hell. Nevertheless, the entertainment of life losses is still relevant. Many people, myself not excluded, watch regularly violent imagery in form of videos, films and other formats. In this context, the dystopian aspect of enjoying other suffering, to exaggerate, is part of human civilizations and will not be abandoned anytime soon. But on the other hand side, there is neither a control of emotions and of the human sex instinct, nor external birth control planned. I only speak for the whole of Germany though. Thank you all very much for listening. As already mentioned in the disclaimer in the beginning of the video, there are links to the documents containing the quotes for further insight on the book. There are also links to the other used sources, as given pictures, information and music. Speaking of which, I use songs of mine which you can check out. I also make other stuff on YouTube, which you can also check out, especially the song Double Plus Good Ink Sock, which is made in addition to this video as the creative product. Chapeau to George Orwell writing this book, without which I would have been less traumatized and shattered. Please, if you have not yet read the book, consider reading it, even though you have been massively spoiled by now. Please also like and subscribe, leave a comment and all of what the cool YouTubers say. Have a great day and enjoy life, as long as you still can.